Marcus Bennett's footsteps echoed through the marble halls of the county courthouse, a building he knew as intimately as his own home. The soft cotton of his navy blue hoodie felt comfortable against his skin, a pleasant change from the crisp suits he typically wore while prosecuting federal cases. His choice of casual attire reflected the simplicity of his task today, handling a disputed parking ticket from last Thursday evening. The familiar scent of coffee and old leather files filled the air as he approached the security checkpoint. Officer James Thompson, a fixture at the courthouse for over 2 decades, brightened upon seeing Marcus. Their shared appreciation for early morning basketball games had sparked countless conversations over the years. "Well, if it isn't the man who never loses a case," Thompson called out, his weathered face crinkling with genuine warmth. "Dressed down today, counselor." Marcus chuckled, placing his keys and phone in the security tray. "Even federal prosecutors have ordinary problems, James. Dealing with a parking ticket that shouldn't exist. Must be serious if you're handling it personally," Thompson remarked, watching Marcus pass through the metal detector with practiced ease. "Usually, you'd send one of your junior associates for something like this." "Teaching moment," Marcus replied, collecting his belongings. "Sometimes you need to show that everyone, regardless of position, follows the same procedures." He glanced at his watch, 8:45 a.m., plenty of time before his scheduled appearance. The morning sun streamed through the towering windows, casting long shadows across the corridor. As Marcus walked toward Courtroom 3B, he noticed several law students huddled near the water fountain, their arms laden with heavy textbooks. Their nervous energy reminded him of his own early days, when every courthouse visit felt like stepping onto hallowed ground. He paused briefly to straighten a crooked painting on the wall, a black and white photograph of the courthouse from 1950. Small details mattered in this place of justice, something his mentor had impressed upon him during his first year as a prosecutor. The wooden benches outside the courtroom were already filling with people clutching papers and whispering to their attorneys. A young mother bounced a fussy baby on her knee while reviewing documents. Marcus chose a spot near the back, pulling out his phone to review his case notes one final time. His evidence was impeccable. Time-stamped photos showing the malfunctioning meter, maintenance records obtained through a friendly request to the City Works Department, and even a statement from a shop owner who had witnessed similar meter issues that week. Though the amount was minimal, the principle mattered. Fair treatment under the law wasn't just a phrase from his closing arguments, it was a standard he lived by. The courtroom doors opened precisely at 9:00 a.m., right as Marcus finished responding to an urgent email from his office. As people filed in, he noticed several familiar faces among the court staff. Angela at the stenographer's desk gave him a subtle nod, and Roberto, the Spanish interpreter, flashed a quick smile of recognition. Marcus took his place in the gallery, observing the methodical preparation of the courtroom. The morning sunlight streaming through the high windows created an almost theatrical atmosphere, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. He couldn't help but smile at the irony. After hundreds of appearances as a prosecutor, here he sat as a regular citizen, waiting his turn for justice. Little did he know that this ordinary Monday morning would soon become anything but routine, as the new judge's gavel would set in motion events that would impact far more than a simple parking fine. Judge Sandra Wilson's chambers gleamed with an air of freshly established authority. Her law degree from Yale, still carrying a hint of new frame smell, hung prominently beside her recent judicial appointment certificate. She straightened her robes before her ornate mirror, ensuring every pleat fell perfectly into place. The morning docket appeared routine. Traffic violations, minor disputes, and municipal infractions. Judge Wilson had developed a reputation during her first month for running an efficient courtroom, taking pride in processing cases swiftly while maintaining what she considered appropriate decorum. "Your Honor," her clerk Jennifer stepped in, carrying a stack of case files. "Today's docket is particularly full. 23 cases before lunch." She placed the files on the judge's desk, each one color-coded according to the organizational system Judge Wilson had implemented. "Excellent," the judge replied, picking up the first file without opening it. "Let's ensure we maintain proper order today. I've noticed some individuals attempt to turn simple proceedings into lengthy debates." She pursed her lips, recalling yesterday's extended argument over a stop sign violation. The antique grandfather clock in the corner, a gift from her former law firm, chimed 9 times. Judge Wilson gathered her materials, mentally preparing for another day of dispensing justice. Her heels clicked purposefully against the polished floor as she made her way toward her courtroom. Bailiff Richard Martinez held the door open, standing at attention. "Good morning, Your Honor. The gallery is nearly full today." Judge Wilson nodded curtly, appreciating his professional demeanor. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted as she entered, conversations hushing, papers rustling as people rose to their feet. The morning light cast long shadows through the vertical blinds, creating alternate bands of light and shadow across her bench. She settled into her high-backed leather chair, its newness still evident in the way it creaked. The American flag to her right and the state flag to her left framed her position of authority perfectly. Judge Wilson allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. This was exactly where she had aimed to be since her first day of law school. "Be seated," she commanded, her voice carrying clearly through the modern sound system. She observed the gallery with careful attention, noting the usual mix of attorneys in suits and citizens in various states of business casual attire. Her eyes paused briefly on a young man in a hoodie seated near the back, making a mental note about appropriate courtroom attire. The first few cases proceeded exactly as she preferred, quick, orderly, and with clear respect for her authority. A speeding ticket resulted in a standard fine, a noise complaint was efficiently resolved with a warning, and a minor property dispute was scheduled for mediation. "Next case," she called out, not yet looking up from her notes. The shuffling of feet approached the podium. Judge Wilson lifted her eyes, immediately noticing it was the young man in the hoodie she had spotted earlier. She felt her jaw tighten slightly. "Your Honor," he began, his voice carrying a note of confidence that seemed out of place given his casual appearance. Judge Wilson cut him off with a sharp rap of her gavel. "Before we proceed, I remind everyone that this is a court of law, not a casual gathering. Proper respect for these proceedings is expected." Her words carried a clear edge, setting the stage for what would become an unexpected lesson in assumptions and authority. What she didn't realize was that her next few decisions would not only challenge her perception of justice, but would also lead to a profound moment of professional reckoning. Marcus maintained steady eye contact with Judge Wilson as he began presenting his case. "Your Honor, regarding citation number 47,892, I have evidence demonstrating the parking meter in question was malfunctioning at the time of the incident." He reached into his messenger bag, retrieving a neatly organized folder. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed softly as he arranged his documentation on the podium. Several other attendees leaned forward, intrigued by his methodical approach. "I have time-stamped photographs showing the meter's display malfunction," Marcus continued, his voice carrying the same measured tone he used when presenting federal cases. "Additionally, I've obtained maintenance records from the City Works Department indicating." Judge Wilson's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Sir, are you attempting to tell this court how to interpret parking regulations?" She peered down from her bench, her reading glasses perched at the tip of her nose. Marcus blinked once, maintaining his composure. "No, Your Honor. I'm simply presenting relevant evidence as is my right under Municipal Code Section 8.45, which states." "I'm well aware of the Municipal Code," Judge Wilson interrupted again, her fingers drumming a sharp rhythm on her desk. The sound echoed through the now silent courtroom. "What I'm not aware of is when this became a lecture hall rather than a courtroom." The gallery shifted uncomfortably. Sarah Jenkins, the court clerk, looked up from her computer screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she recognized the measured cadence in Marcus's speech. a tone she'd heard countless times in federal proceedings. "Your Honor, if I may," Marcus tried again, sliding a document forward. The maintenance records clearly show a pattern of malfunction on that particular meter. 3 other citations were voided that same week due to. Judge Wilson raised her hand sharply. "Mr." She glanced at the citation. "Bennett, this court's time is valuable. The photo you're attempting to present shows the meter at 7:45 p.m., while the citation was issued at 8:15 p.m. How do you explain that gap?" Marcus nodded, appreciating the precise question. "That's addressed in the second exhibit, Your Honor." The meter's digital display was cycling through random numbers, as documented by the shop owner whose statement is included, if you'll notice the timestamp sequence. "Mr. Bennett," Judge Wilson's voice carried a note of growing irritation. "Are you suggesting that every person who receives a parking ticket should conduct their own investigation and present a novel's worth of evidence?" The morning sun had shifted, casting different shadows across the courtroom. Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the room as he stood straight, his response measured and clear. "Your Honor, I'm suggesting that when evidence of a system malfunction exists, it's in the interest of justice to—" "Enough," Judge Wilson declared, shuffling the papers before her without looking at them. "This court will not be delayed by elaborate excuses, regardless of how well presented they may be. The fine stands, and given your persistent attempts to overcomplicate this matter, it's now doubled." A soft murmur rippled through the gallery. Angela, the stenographer, typed with slightly more force than necessary, her years of experience telling her this situation was about to take an unexpected turn. Marcus remained still, his hand resting lightly on his credential wallet in his pocket. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. How many times had he stood in this very courtroom, albeit on the other side of different proceedings? He drew a calm breath, preparing to reveal his identity, unaware that the next few moments would transform this simple hearing into a powerful lesson about prejudice and presumption. The courtroom air grew thick with tension as Marcus carefully withdrew his credentials from his pocket. Before he could present them, Judge Wilson's voice sliced through the atmosphere once again. "Mr. Bennett, I should warn you that any further attempts to prolong these proceedings will result in additional penalties." Her tone carried a finality that made several seasoned attorneys in the gallery exchange knowing glances. "Your Honor," Marcus began, his voice maintaining its professional calm, "I believe it's important to note my position as someone who thinks they understand the law better than this court." Judge Wilson interjected, her frustration evident. "I've seen this behavior before, Mr. Bennett. A little knowledge can be dangerous, especially when it leads people to believe they can lecture the court." Marcus felt the weight of his federal prosecutor's badge in his hand, still concealed below the podium's edge. The morning light streaming through the windows caught the metal surface, creating a subtle gleam. Several regular courthouse employees had now stopped their usual activities, their attention drawn to the unfolding scene. "Your Honor, with all due respect," Marcus tried again, "my position within the federal—" "Mr. Bennett," Judge Wilson's voice rose sharply, "if you say one more word about your position, I will have no choice but to cite you for contempt. This is a simple parking violation, not a constitutional crisis." The gallery had grown so quiet that the gentle whir of the air conditioning seemed thunderous. Sarah Jenkins, the court clerk, was now frantically writing something on a notepad, her eyes darting between the judge and Marcus. "The fine is now tripled," Judge Wilson declared, her gavel punctuating each word. "This court will not tolerate attempts to transform a straightforward matter into a legal seminar." Marcus stood perfectly still, years of courtroom experience evident in his measured breathing and steady gaze. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, not in anger, but in recognition of the situation's profound irony. Officer Thompson, who had greeted Marcus earlier that morning, appeared at the courtroom door, drawn by the unusual tension emanating from within. His eyes widened as he realized what was unfolding. "Furthermore," Judge Wilson continued, shuffling papers with clear irritation, Let this serve as a reminder that watching legal television shows does not qualify one to. At that precise moment, Sarah Jenkins managed to catch the bailiff's attention, urgently waving her notepad. The bailiff's eyes scanned the hastily written message, and his professional demeanor cracked slightly as recognition dawned. Marcus remained at the podium, his credentials now visible in his hand but not yet presented. The morning sun had shifted again, illuminating his face as he prepared to speak one final time. "Your Honor," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of 15 years of federal prosecution experience. "I apologize for any perceived disrespect, but I believe there's been a significant—" The bailiff was already moving toward the bench, his steps quick and purposeful. Judge Wilson raised her gavel once more, prepared to deliver another rebuke, when the bailiff reached her side and whispered urgently in her ear. The courtroom held its collective breath as Judge Wilson's expression began to transform, her raised gavel frozen in midair as the bailiff's words registered. The moment hung suspended, like a drop of water before it falls, as the true nature of the situation finally began to dawn. The next few seconds would permanently alter the dynamic of this courtroom, teaching lessons that would resonate far beyond a simple parking ticket dispute. The color slowly drained from Judge Wilson's face as the bailiff finished whispering in her ear. Her gavel lowered gradually, like a sunset descending on her previous certainty. The morning light caught the golden trim of her robes, highlighting her now rigid posture. "Your Honor," Sarah Jenkins called out, her voice steady despite the situation. "I have Mr. Bennett's complete file here." She raised a thick folder embossed with federal courthouse markings, its edges worn from frequent use in high-profile cases. Marcus still stood at the podium, his federal prosecutor's badge now catching the light. The shield's surface reflected small patterns onto the wooden surface before him, dancing like tiny stars. The gallery remained silent, but the atmosphere had shifted from tension to anticipation. "Mr. Bennett," Judge Wilson began, her voice notably different from moments before, "I believe you were about to explain your position with the federal prosecutor's office." The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken recognition. "Yes, Your Honor," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the same professional courtesy it had maintained throughout the proceedings. "I've served as lead prosecutor for the federal district court for the past decade. Many of your colleagues might remember the Richardson case from last month." A soft murmur rippled through the courtroom as several attorneys in the gallery nodded in recognition. The Richardson case had made headlines for its groundbreaking precedent in corporate law. Judge Wilson's hands folded carefully on her desk, her earlier frustration replaced by a dawning understanding. "The Richardson case," she echoed softly. "I studied your arguing points from that case during my judicial preparation." Officer Thompson had made his way into the courtroom, standing near the back wall. His presence added another layer of validation to Marcus's identity, remembering their friendly exchange just an hour earlier. "I apologize for not introducing myself properly at the outset," Marcus continued, his tone remaining remarkably free of reproach. "I believe the evidence for the parking violation would speak for itself, regardless of my position." Sarah Jenkins approached the bench with Marcus's file, each step echoing in the hushed courtroom. The file contained newspaper clippings of his most significant cases, commendations from the Department of Justice, and photographs of him arguing before the Supreme Court. Judge Wilson accepted the file with slightly trembling hands, her eyes scanning the first page. The morning sun had shifted again, now illuminating the years of accomplishments documented within those pages. "The court will take a brief recess," Judge Wilson announced, her voice carrying a note of something beyond professional courtesy, perhaps the first hints of genuine humility. "Mr. Bennett, would you please approach the bench?" As Marcus stepped forward, the gallery remained still, witnessing a moment that transcended a simple parking ticket dispute. The scene had transformed into something more significant, a powerful reminder about presumptions and the true nature of justice. The bailiff adjusted his position, standing slightly straighter as Marcus approached the bench. Sarah Jenkins began organizing her papers with deliberate care, her earlier urgency replaced by quiet satisfaction that truth had finally emerged. In the gentle morning light of Courtroom 3B, two legal professionals stood face to face, about to engage in a conversation that would reshape more than just one morning's proceedings. The weight of the moment pressed against the wooden walls, promising to echo far beyond this day's docket. The lessons of the next few minutes would ripple through the courthouse halls for years to come, a testament to the importance of looking beyond immediate appearances to find the truth that lies beneath. Judge Wilson faced Marcus at the bench, their conversation shielded by the gentle hum of white noise designed for private discussions. Her earlier stern demeanor had melted into something more genuine, more human. "Mr. Bennett," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I owe you more than a simple apology. My behavior this morning was—" She paused, searching for the right words. It was unbecoming of this court and everything it represents. Marcus stood with the same dignified presence he had maintained throughout the proceedings. The sunlight streaming through the high windows created a gentle glow around them both, as if nature itself was highlighting this moment of understanding. "Your Honor," he responded softly. "Every day in these courtrooms, we all strive to uphold justice. Sometimes that includes acknowledging our own moments of oversight." His words carried no hint of accusation, only a profound understanding of human nature. Judge Wilson glanced down at his file again, noting the numerous commendations and achievements. Her eyes lingered on a photograph of Marcus receiving an award for his work in civil rights prosecution. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. "The Richardson case," she said, almost to herself. "I spent weeks studying your arguments. The way you handled the complex evidence, the precedents you established." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "I should have recognized your name immediately." In the gallery, the morning's other cases waited patiently, the scheduled participants somehow understanding that they were witnessing something significant. Sarah Jenkins continued her quiet organization of files, though her attention remained focused on the scene unfolding before her. "Perhaps," Marcus suggested gently, "this morning serves a greater purpose than resolving a parking ticket. We all carry certain—" He paused thoughtfully, "preconceptions that deserve examination." Judge Wilson nodded slowly, her judicial demeanor temporarily set aside in favor of genuine reflection. "Mr. Bennett, would you consider sharing this experience with our judicial training program? Your perspective would be invaluable." The morning light shifted again, creating new patterns across the courtroom floor. Officer Thompson, still standing at the back, smiled slightly, remembering his earlier greeting with Marcus. The contrast between that morning interaction and what had just transpired spoke volumes. "I would be honored, Your Honor," Marcus replied. "Though perhaps we should first resolve the matter of my parking ticket." A slight smile touched his lips, breaking the remaining tension in the air. Judge Wilson straightened, gathering herself. "Yes, of course." She cleared her throat softly. "Given the evidence you presented, evidence I should have reviewed more carefully, the citation is dismissed." As they prepared to return to their respective positions in the courtroom, Judge Wilson added one final thought. "Mr. Bennett, thank you for maintaining your professionalism throughout this learning experience." Marcus nodded respectfully. "We're all students of justice, Your Honor. Some lessons just come in unexpected ways." The white noise machine was switched off as they stepped back to their formal positions. The gallery settled, anticipating the official resolution of what had become much more than a simple traffic case. Judge Wilson raised her eyes to address the full courtroom, ready to demonstrate that true authority comes not from wielding power, but from acknowledging one's mistakes and learning from them. The morning sun continued its journey across the sky, illuminating a moment of transformation in Courtroom 3B. The courtroom settled into an attentive silence as Judge Wilson cleared her throat, preparing to address everyone present. Her next words would carry weight far beyond their immediate meaning. "Before we proceed with the remaining cases," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "I need to address what has transpired this morning." She paused, looking directly at the gallery rather than her notes. Mr. Bennett presented his case with clarity, professionalism, and respect, qualities I failed to reciprocate. As a federal prosecutor, his reputation for fairness and dedication to justice precedes him. However, that's not why I'm making this statement. Marcus stood respectfully at the podium, his presence adding gravity to the moment. Several law students who had been observing the morning's proceedings leaned forward, their notepads temporarily forgotten. The role of this court, Judge Wilson continued, is to ensure justice is served without prejudice or presumption. Today, I failed to uphold that standard. My hasty judgments and assumptions led to a series of inappropriate decisions. Sarah Jenkins had stopped typing, her hands hovering over the stenograph keys as she captured every word. The morning light now filled the entire courtroom, as if nature itself wanted to illuminate this moment of truth. Mr. Bennett, Judge Wilson turned her attention directly to him. Would you share with the court the lesson your mentor once taught you? The one about patience and understanding. Marcus nodded, adjusting his position slightly. My mentor, Judge Harrison Thomas, once told me that true justice requires us to see beyond our first impressions. He said, the law books teach us statutes, but our humanity teaches us justice. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the gallery. Officer Thompson, still present at the back of the courtroom, nodded in agreement, remembering his own experiences with Judge Thomas. Those words, Judge Wilson responded, reflect the standard this court must always strive to maintain. Today's proceedings have reminded us that justice wears no particular clothing, carries no specific title, and appears in no predetermined form. She gestured to her own robes. These garments represent authority, but true justice comes from our ability to listen, understand, and acknowledge our mistakes when we make them. Marcus shared a brief smile with Sarah Jenkins, who had worked alongside him on numerous federal cases. The morning's events had transformed from a potential confrontation into a powerful teaching moment. Therefore, Judge Wilson announced, her voice carrying renewed authority, let the record show that not only is Mr. Bennett's citation dismissed, but this court extends its sincere apology for failing to provide the fair hearing every citizen deserves. The gallery remained silent, absorbing the significance of the moment. A senior attorney in the back row quietly closed his laptop, understanding that he was witnessing something more valuable than any prepared argument. Mr. Bennett, Judge Wilson concluded, thank you for turning what could have been a contentious moment into an opportunity for growth and understanding. Marcus bowed slightly. Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Thomas would say this is exactly how our justice system should work, through understanding, acknowledgement, and growth. As the morning session prepared to resume its regular schedule, something had shifted in Courtroom 3B. The air felt lighter, clearer, as if a window had been opened to let in fresh perspective. The next case was called, but the lesson learned would linger in the minds of everyone present, a reminder that true justice requires not just knowledge of the law, but the wisdom to see beyond surface appearances. 1 week after the memorable morning in Courtroom 3B, Marcus Bennett stood before a different audience. The courthouse's main conference room buzzed with energy as young legal professionals, judges, and court staff gathered for the first session of the newly established Judicial Perspective program. Judge Wilson sat in the front row, her presence a testament to her commitment to change. The morning light filtered through the tall windows, reminiscent of that transformative day the previous week. Legal education, Marcus began, addressing the packed room, teaches us statutes, procedures, and precedents. But our most valuable lessons often come from unexpected moments. He glanced at Judge Wilson, who nodded encouragingly. The presentation screen behind him displayed the program's mission statement, building bridges between justice and understanding. Sarah Jenkins had helped craft the wording, drawing from her years of observing both triumph and oversight in the courtroom. Last week, Marcus continued, a parking ticket became something more. It became a reminder that justice requires us to look deeper, to question our initial assumptions, and to remain open to growth. Officer Thompson, standing by the door, smiled as he watched several young officers taking detailed notes. His morning greetings to courthouse visitors had taken on new meaning since that day. Judge Wilson stood up, joining Marcus at the podium. This program, she addressed the audience, was born from a moment of humility. As judges, we hold significant power, but with that power comes the responsibility to acknowledge our potential for error. The room absorbed their words, understanding that they were witnessing the beginning of something significant. A young law clerk raised her hand, asking how they could implement these principles in their daily work. "Start with awareness," Marcus responded, sharing a knowing look with Judge Wilson. "Every person who enters these halls carries their own story, their own dignity. Our task is to ensure justice sees them all equally." The program outline included practical exercises, role-playing scenarios, and regular discussion forums. But more importantly, it emphasized the human element of justice, the understanding that beyond every case number was a person deserving of fair consideration. As the session concluded, Judge Wilson and Marcus found themselves standing in the same spot where their paths had first crossed. The hallway now carried a different energy, filled with voices discussing change and understanding. "You've turned our moment of tension into a movement for change," Judge Wilson observed, watching the participants file out, still engaged in animated discussion. Marcus smiled, adjusting his tie. He'd worn a suit today, though everyone understood it wasn't the clothes that defined his worth. Sometimes the best lessons come from our most challenging moments. The courthouse clock chimed noon, its sound echoing through the corridors. In Courtroom 3B, a new set of cases waited to be heard, but now they would be approached with fresh perspective and deeper understanding. Sarah Jenkins appeared with a stack of registration forms for future sessions. "We've already received requests from 3 other districts," she reported, beaming with pride. As they walked together toward the courthouse steps, Marcus, Judge Wilson, and their colleagues represented a new chapter in their legal community. The morning sun highlighted their path, just as it had done on that transformative day. The parking meter that had started it all still stood on the corner, now functioning perfectly. But it had served its purpose, initiating a change that would ripple through the justice system, one perspective shift at a time. The story of a simple parking ticket had evolved into something far more meaningful, a reminder that justice, in its truest form, sees beyond appearances to the heart of human dignity.